Let's get more insights on the President's statements on improving the economy from Nomura Chief ASEAN Economist, Euben Paracuelles, joining us now from Singapore. Euben, thank you so much for joining us. You heard the economic reform program of President Marcos. What stood out for you?
Hi, Rico. Yeah, first of all, I must say it was a very well-delivered speech, which is very important from a policy communication standpoint, especially if you're trying to attract foreign investors. And it seems clear to me that he's taking suggestions from the economic team, which again would be welcomed by markets. Fiscal consolidation seems to be a priority. He's talked about the medium-term fiscal sustainability, but also striking a balance, not trying to hurt the recovery in the process of reducing the fiscal deficit. So I think that is a very big priority, and it seems to be clear that this is what he wants to do in the next 6 years.
He has many ambitious goals for the Filipino people, improving their lives over the next 6 years. But how realistic are these promises of the President, and can they really be achieved?
I think for some of the sectors that he prioritized, things like infrastructure, energy, and even digitalization, I think there's a very strong case to promote these sectors. And I think, there's a good chance for them to be able to kind of implement the right policies there. Where I'm not so sure is in agriculture, because the focus on agriculture seems to be very high in the Marcos administration. But promoting that, I think, as a driver of growth, I think it takes a very long time. The sector itself is low in productivity. We've seen this in Thailand, which was stuck in a sort of a low growth trajectory even before the pandemic. So I would argue that it would make much more sense to focus on developing a manufacturing sector. That's where the jobs are being created. That's also more complementary of our demographic structure, but also the kinds of services sector that we already have.
Why didn't he touch on this specific aspect of improving the manufacturing sector, which will create jobs and also boost economic growth?
I think that's really speaking to the fact that he wants to develop agriculture first. And I think there's a little bit of a sense of urgency here because, as he pointed out at the beginning of his speech, inflation is very high. Food supply globally is going to be low. And that's going to leave the country more vulnerable. So in that sense, I think there has to be some focus on the agriculture sector, but as a long-term driver of the economy, I think manufacturing will be the bigger driver.
The President also wants to impose, Euben, a value-added tax on digital service providers. Will this be a big help in revenue generation?
I think it's not that big. It's relatively small. It has to be complemented with something else, which is why some of the priorities in the legislative agenda that he outlined, continuing on the tax reform packages that the Duterte administration could not complete, things like property valuation standards. I think those would be very helpful. And again, in addition to what Secretary Jokno has been saying, that better tax collection efficiency has to be implemented. And I think that needs to kind of come up right at the get-go.
Well, better tax collection efficiency, that has always been the promise of previous administrations. What makes you think that we could improve tax collection during this administration?
I think with Secretary Jokno at the helm, I think there's a better chance for that to be more successful. He's much more experienced. He knows what needs to be done. And again, we've seen it in other countries in the region that if there's a very strong focus on tax collections, I think we could get to more permanent increases in revenues. But again, it can only go so far. We need to have extra revenues raised from somewhere else. So from digital services, that's fine. But I think there's got to be more.
All right, there has to be more. Before this SONA, there was a lot of talk among President Marcos Jr.'s allies of taxing single-use plastics. It wasn't mentioned during this State of the Nation address. And should it be part of the tax reform package?
Yeah, I believe so. And I think that comes nicely alongside the drive to address climate change. Again, what I would say is across the region, the Philippines is probably one of the laggards when it comes to coming up with concrete plans to reduce carbon emissions, right? And I think we need laws for that to be prioritized and implemented properly. So, yeah, I think if there was one thing missing that I in the speech was really having concrete and strategic policies when it comes to addressing climate change.
Nomura Chief ASEAN Economist Euben Paracuelles joining us from Singapore. Thank you so much for your insights. So what did